talking with Gene O'Grady, the publisher of Dewey B Strategic. Gene, how did you get started blogging?
It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was following a lot of the blogs in the legal information area, and I noticed that none of the bloggers were women. Most of them were men, and yet I'm in a profession that is mostly female. And I began to wonder why. And then in addition to that, I would sometimes disagree with some of the opinions I would read in these blogs. And I kept murmuring to myself, somebody should start a new blog to counter some of this. And it just all came together in around 2011. The name Dewey B Strategic literally popped into my head while I was sitting at my desk. Because actually I like the idea of Bruce McEwen had a blog called Adam Smith. And I thought he took somebody from history, which he turned into a blog name. And I was playing with Melville Dewey as the founder of librarianship, and I sort of somehow came up with this little pun of Dewey B Strategic, which is sort of also the question of, are we strategic, which I think is the question we struggle with both as a profession and also with perception, because librarianship is often perceived as, a sort of a profession that is not necessarily forward-thinking. We are the only profession that has a ridiculous cartoon stereotype that you can see almost anywhere. It's identifiable.
And to give context to this, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm the director. Well, for the past 40 years, I've been an information professional in AALL 100 law firm. So I have been managing multi-million-dollar budgets, negotiating contracts, introducing workflow changes and innovation into how lawyers practice. And so I was just at a point in my career where I'd had enough experience that I thought it's time to put another voice out there, and I pulled it together. And
how did you get started in that career, going all the way back? Both of us have been around in law firms for a long
question.
term.
I was always interested in law, and my first few jobs out of law, undergraduate, were law-related. I worked for the Vera Institute of Justice. I worked in a law department of a social services agency. And in one of those jobs, I was supposed to do a certain kind of public records research. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, if you're that good at research, you should become a librarian. And I always thought of librarians as catalogers, not as researchers. I had my own stereotypes. So I almost immediately enrolled at the program at St. John's University. I lived in New York at the time. And I started my MLS. And the first job I got was at Pace University up in Westchester. And it was just a great introduction. And so I did that while I was getting my degree. I was a part-time librarian at Pace, and then I got my first law firm job at Proskauer after I got my degree. And then about a year and a half later, I had the opportunity to become the director at Shea & Gould, which was a wonderful experience because they didn't have any databases at that time. So I got to work very closely with the litigators and introduce them the things that non-traditional, like business information, could help them with their litigation. So it was a very exciting time because that's literally when Lexis and Westlaw were just coming onto the market, when Dialogue actually had, a command language. There was no such thing as full text. You actually had to put commands into the database. So it was a very exciting time to introduce lawyers to new kinds of information. Also, at that, I had support to actually build my first KM system there. West had a KM service called Private Files, and we actually built a brief bank. This was back in 1986. So, I had a lot of opportunities, early in my career to do some exciting things. So, I've moved from to different law firms. I had a wonderful experience moving to D.C. and working at Wilmer, Cutler & Pickering, which became Wilmer Hale. And then since then I've moved to DLA Piper, which is a 4,000 attorney law firm. But, I've always worked in environments where the firm leaders were very interested in innovation, so I've always had tremendous support. And so, it's just been an incredibly exciting career. But back to the blog, I think I also realized that, I'll be honest, I am coming to the the last years of my career at some point, and I really wanted to inspire younger librarians to feel like it's okay to have a voice, it's okay to be a little bit controversial. And I think that was my biggest worry when I started the blog, was that I would upset people and that people would send me nasty grams, and all of that has happened, and I've survived it. You know?
and you, I mean, you can get large companies now coming to you and saying, if we did this with our pricing this with our products, and you slap their hand before they start.
Right. People call leaders at publishing companies, feel me out on issues. You know, like, what do you think of this strategy? Would you come out and would you scold us if we did this? And I am very honest. I said, I think this would be terrible for the law firm I work for. You know, and it's tricky for me because I always have to be careful about speaking. Which hat am I wearing? Am I speaking to you as a blogger? But I have to say, I am always advocating for the interests of the law firm, because that's my first priority, is to make sure my firm gets a good deal.
Well, with blogging for me, you know, I learn a lot. So, so I'm bringing that back to my organization. I mean, I've got to believe the people you've met, the things that you've read, the ideas that you've processed, tremendous advantage to your employer by what you're getting out of blogging. And
I also, because I'm a blogger, there's a tremendous pressure on me. I always like to read, but now I feel an obligation to my readers to know what is happening and to keep up on the big trends. So there's a win-win. It helps me in my career. It helps me to come up with interesting ideas for the blog. So, and people actually reach out to me and suggest topics to me. So I don't have any shortage of topics and things to write out.
You're a prolific blogger, too. I mean, you publish a lot.
I've gotten better. You know, I mean, I remember, I think the first year my blog existed, I think I heard from somebody at ALM that I was sort of on the borderline when they were, ABA. They said I was on the borderline. They weren't sure whether I had blogged enough, and that made me aware that I should be blogging more regularly. So my original goal was to write a post at least one a week, and so now I am probably doing 2 a week, but I've gotten better at it, although I'm still famous for my typos. I have friends and colleagues who very kind early in the morning say, you know, you really need to fix that.
But your readers will let you know.
Yes.
And my readers let me know. You may not want to use there, that. You may want to use the other there.
Right. You know,
but that's kind of what makes blogging too. You know, we've been here. I came down on Saturday and I sat in on the summit for private law, and realized the passion that is associated with law libraries and the people that work at them, whether it's in private firms, law schools, down to state law libraries, county law libraries, and I asked you, do you think that there would be people that would blog in that audience? And I think it took about 2 or 3 minutes, and you had people walking over and introducing to me. What do you think the potential might be of having almost a law libraries? It's really a network inside of a network where they begin to blog and share their insight and commentary.
Yes, I think librarians have a lot to say. I mean, I think the challenge is everybody has a different personal situation and work situation. So I just happened to be at a point in my career where I had the extra time to do things, because obviously this is not something I do at work. This is something I have to find time for at night. So, but I absolutely think that there are incredibly smart people who are very interested in transforming the practice of law, delivering better insights to whatever kind of an organization they work for. So, yes, there are so many opinions floating around this association.
Yeah, I got a list of names in my pocket from
There will be no shortage of opinions on products, on technology trends. Yes, you can get a lot of deep and wonderful insights from this group of professionals.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and kick it around with the crew, but my gut tells me we'll end up offering LexBlog platform for free to law librarians. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about blogging just in general, because there could be all this misconceptions and whatnot. We were just chatting a little bit ago about how do people find blogs, and somebody last night at a fast case party said, well, when they start a blog, what type of marketing and public relations work has to be done to get people to find a blog? And I said, no, people just find you. I mean,
Well, I'll be honest. I actually went out to Greg Lambert, who had a very famous blog, and I told him, I said, Greg, I'm going to be launching my blog. Do you have any advice for me?
Yep.
Here's my first post. And he was very kind. And on his blog, he said, he wrote a post called Gene O'Grady Comes Out Swinging, or something like that.
I told people the same thing. I told, at that time it was Preston Gates now it's KLG, and they said, well, they were going to send out a press release. I said, that'll look really lame. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But start a blog and then ask for some advice from other people, because you really don't know yet what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I gave them names of people, and that time it was in e-discovery. And I said, why don't you just ask some of the people that are already writing on e-discovery what they think of what you're writing. And they might say nice things about you. And that is what made their blog take off, was Dennis Kennedy in St. Louis that wrote a piece about their blog, and also wrote a piece about the fact that it was very refreshing to hear that somebody asked for somebody's advice as opposed to come out and say it's the greatest thing in the world. But it is fascinating. The other question about blogging, I'm hearing now certain people will even have, and law firms will have other people write their content for them. So I know that makes you're looking at me like, how can that possibly be? What's going through your head when you heard that? What was going through your head?
What's the point of having somebody else? I mean, don't you have an opinion? I mean, the point is to take your expertise and your opinion and shape it into something. And I think that's another interesting thing.
There's companies inside this arena that sell law blogs with the content in them.
That's weird. Well, I don't think it's hard to imagine those would actually rise to them, because I think people recognize sincerity.
Right.
And, it's interesting, because I used to think that I would run out of things to write about. And then there are times when, as I am writing, what I actually think comes together during the process of writing. I don't know what I'm going to conclude, but a lot of other things flow into my brain, and I start to see connections that I wasn't thinking of when I sat down to write. So it actually is a somewhat creative process.
It is, and I tell people, I say, I don't know what I know until I blog it.
No, that's exactly.
And they go, what do you mean you don't know?
I did not understand that until I experienced it. I have had that exact experience.
Because you start to write it, how can you put the title in until you write? Because I don't know what it's going to be until I'm done. And people look at me and they'll go, what are you talking about? They'll ask me, don't you outline every post bullet by bullet? And I go, no, I just kind of start. And I don't know how you do it, but I'm always sharing what I'm reading other places. And so I see things and I'm reading it, and so my blog becomes almost like the old days where you would Xerox an article in a magazine or a newspaper, and you'd send it on to a client with a note and explaining why it might be interesting for them to read it. My blog has become a lot of that, where I read and I share. I don't know what's the impetus for what becomes a post?
Well, a lot of it, because there's so much change in technology. I actually do write about a lot of new products or additions to products. There was about a year ago, there were several big controversies in the law librarianship information profession that I was blogging about, and it wasn't necessarily content related. It was trying to talk out loud about how librarians were perceived and whether a change in the name of the association. So those blog posts became very controversial, I think, to some people, because I was on one side of the argument and not everybody agreed with me. I thought that there should have been a name change. But AALL actually did rebrand itself as the AALL, and your legal knowledge network is now the tagline, which I think is very effective, and I think it does summarize what we do.
It is amazing the impact you can have on large organizations and even billion-dollar companies, that when you'll see them and they'll know what your opinions are on things, and the conversation is different. It's been a great equalizer to blog for me. Last question I wanted to ask you, for young people, that are thinking about blogging and they're in knowledge management, working in libraries, and whether it's firms or law schools and whatnot, how do they overcome that fear? Should I do this? And as part of that, what do you think it would do for their careers?
Oh, I have to say, it's been an extraordinary. the benefits of blogging have been beyond my wildest dreams. I've been invited to speak literally all over the world. People reach out to me. People call me for advice. And I very much want to encourage young professionals, because I think it is a very exciting time to be in the legal information industry. I think there will be a lot of opportunity. I'm most familiar with law firms, but I think that information professionals have to broaden their expertise into data science and analytics. There's a lot of growth opportunities. Law firms are demanding different kinds of intelligence now. So I actually think doing a lot of reading, expressing your ideas is very, very important. I mean, you can even start out by writing things for within your organization. If you want to practice, PLL and AALL have their own internal publications where you can post things and see what people's reaction are. Because we have a very forthcoming community. People will tell you what you think, and you can sort of see what kind of reactions you're going to get. But don't be afraid.
Yeah, but when you have your own thing, then people respond to your own publication, it's tremendous. This love that you get motivates you to keep doing it. I'm so much impactful than if you were writing inside.
I am all for it, and in fact, but what I did was I knew that I didn't have my first obstacle is I didn't have the technology skills to set up the blog, so I went to some young, technologically savvy people to help me figure out what I needed to know. And I sort of had an idea of what the visual was, and I just started. I mean, I think in the beginning, I think the first year I think I have a much better blog today than I did 5 years ago. But that was another interesting thing. I went back and I looked at 3 Geeks in the beginning, and I saw, oh yeah, it's changed a lot. And it sort of gave me comfort that this will evolve. I will have time. What it starts out being, it will evolve over time, and I will get to define it. So you don't have to know where it's going right from day one.
At all. In fact, when you go back and look, you almost laugh at some of the first stuff. Like, I tell people you can blog bad, but for only so long.
Yeah, exactly. I think you absolutely need to get your act together. The other really good piece of advice I got was from Ron Friedman at Prism.
Yep.
And he said to me, be very generous, link to other people, acknowledge other people, because you're joining a network and you want to be part of a community. And that was a really good lesson for me, to think about giving other people acknowledgement in my blog.
It's a conversation, and so what you're doing is you're stepping out into this conversation that already exists. The only way they can hear you is if you link to them.
Right.
And I've tried to tell firms that and lawyers that if you want to talk about marketing your blog, talk about other people's stuff, and that's the best way to do it. Hey, this was great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Great having you here at AALL. I hope we'll see you again.
It was great that you told me to get here.